Hey everyone, it's Mike Henry with Follower of One, and today I've invited my friend Warren Lehr to join us for the podcast. Warren, would you tell everybody hi?
Hi, Mike. Hello, everybody. Good to be here.
Great to have you. So, would you tell people a little bit about yourself? Just give them an introduction.
Sure. I grew up in Norman, Oklahoma, and my dad taught at OU, and grew up just loving sports, and that was my whole life for the first 15, 20 years. But I came to Christ when I was 15 and a half, and things kind of went from there. I ended up going to Cameron University and Southwestern Seminary for a few years. It's kind of part of the story. And then I was in the golf business for 25 years. And then lo and behold, about 8 years ago, on the advice of some wise counsel and just God's clear will, I became a city manager. Somebody asked me, what on earth are you doing as a city manager? You were a golf professional at this beautiful course in the mountains of New Mexico, and now you're a city manager. And I always tell them I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. But now it's clearly his will for me to be doing this. And so just happy to be here.
Yeah, he's the city manager of the city of Owasso in Oklahoma, which is where I live. And that's how we became friends. So you became a Christian young, and that's how you ended up going to seminary? What led to all that?
Well, I was 15 when I was a kid. There were 5 kids in our family, and my dad taught at OU. My mom was busy with 5 kids, and when we were real young, I always kind of uh, give a lot of I refer to my praying grandmother, my mom's mother, that always prayed for all the kids and grandkids. And so I ended up, we quit going to church when I was very, very young, and I don't really have very many recollections of it. But I do remember, as a Southern Baptist, First Baptist, Norman, Oklahoma, I do remember the Sunday school teacher came to visit me every single year, and I had to sit in the front room of our little house and listen to them while I wanted to go outside and play. It was painstaking. And but at about 14, 15, I started realizing that it's a big world out there and there's some meaning in it, and maybe there's a purpose for me to be here. And my brother had gone back to church, and ultimately I started going to church at about age 15, 14 and a half, 15, and then came to Christ in a kind of a revival. A fellow named Angel Martinez, a South American evangelist, and came to Christ then.
Very cool. So what prompted you to go to seminary?
Well, my decision was fresh. I played, golf in high school and played golf in college, but my faith was very vibrant during that time in college. We started a Fellowship of Christian Athletes chapter, the first one at Cameron University. I was on the leadership team at the Baptist Student Union also, and just really involved. I actually preached some in local small churches. Cache, Oklahoma, Fletcher, Oklahoma, all those little towns around Lawton, did some supply preaching. I was a speech major, so that seemed, and so I'd done some speaking and preaching and whatnot. And so seminary was I really just wanted to continue my seeking God and learning more. I've always been kind of a learner. And it was really, I didn't have a clear calling of a certain ministry, although I thought I was kind of interested in student ministry, college student ministry. But when I got to seminary, ultimately, I said, I don't have a clear calling. I don't feel called to preach. Student ministry didn't seem to be the thing. And so I tell people I left seminary. It's a little longer story than that. And I won't bore you with that, but I left seminary and became a golf professional. I skipped a step. That's what every preacher wants to do, become a golf pro anyway. So I just skipped the pastoring a church part and became a golf pro.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So you and I met, you were the assistant city manager here. You came here to work with on the golf course stuff here, and you had other responsibilities at the city, correct?
Yes, I came back to my dad had a brain tumor, and most of my family was concentrated in Oklahoma, and I was out in New Mexico, and just felt called to come back. And I had an opportunity under the former city manager, great opportunity to come back and oversee the golf course and the parks department. And then things, as they can in a city manager position, turned a little south for the city manager, and I was kind of a little bit on the hot seat as the assistant city manager. and I told our city council that, hey, I'm good. I'm a good second. I'll stay in this transition. I'll help you find someone else. And then just through a period of about 10 days, and one of those days I talked to you and I said, Mike, I just don't feel called to do this. I don't want to do this. I don't like politics. And there is a political element to city manager. And actually, Mike, you probably said the most influential thing at that time. You said, well, Warren, it's really not up to what you want to do or what you feel called to do. You may be here, Esther 4:14, for such a time as this. I mean, you may be the person that basically, God has for this time. It may be 2 months, it may be 2 years, and that was 8 years ago. So
Yeah.
here I am.
Time flies too. I didn't realize it had been 8 years.
Yeah.
So so tell me a little bit about what it's like with your faith and managing a city government. You have about 200 and some odd or 300 employees, right? The city.
We have about 300 employees, and it's there's a lot of things there. I mean, there's when you come to Christ, in the 70s, everybody wanted to know what's God's will for my life.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to know that. And there was very little at that time. That was a big question, and it still is today, but there's a little bit more good sage advice. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him or submit to him, and he'll make your path straight. And then Proverbs 16:3 says, commit your work to the Lord and he will establish your plans. Those two proverbs together make me think of Carly Fiorina has written a book recently, and she talks about path over plan. When we look back at what seemed like a very circuitous path to get where we are today, all of us, I'm 60. You can do the same thing at 40, I'm sure. But it seems like a very circuitous path. But when you look back, you see that God actually got you on a path, and then he had a plan, and it was actually a pretty straight path when you look back in hindsight. And so that's kind of the city manager thing. And on that path, I was really prepared well to do this. I mean, in the golf business, I managed, multiple departments, multiple divisions with, different people, different equipment, different housing, building, whatnot, with kind of a different mission. And that's what a city, that's what you do. You've got a police department, a fire department, public works, you've got HR, IT, support, all kinds of, parks and recreation and all of that. And you're managing multiple departments. And when I ultimately, after your advice, and I really began dwelling on it, I said, well, there are some ways that God has prepared me for this. And he did. And so how it's different though is, I used to always make the analogy of a jewelry store. If you want to start a jewelry store, you rent some property, you rent a space at the mall, and you buy your product, and you hire your staff, and you get your marketing plan, and it's all you're doing one thing. Golf course is a little more complicated, but a city is infinitely more complicated because every department has a different service to the citizens and is going a different direction. So really what's different is there's a lot more scrutiny on what you do. And from a standpoint of a believer, it's a little different because of general common belief that government and church, separation of church and state, they don't mix. And that's another subject. I love talking about it, but that's in my position with the city. I'm actually more protected than because of First Amendment rights. I'm more protected to freedom of religion maybe than someone in a private business. If I work for you, Mike, and or your dad in the trucking business, and your dad is the boss, and he says no talk about religion and politics, absolutely, and that's a rule, I kind of have to follow that rule if I want to be a good employee and not get myself fired. But in government, there's actually Article 6 of the Constitution that says no religious tests for government employees. In other words, it doesn't matter whether you're an atheist, a Buddhist, a Hindu, a Muslim, you cannot be discriminated because of your religious beliefs. So there's a little bit more freedom.
Interesting, interesting perspective. I've told you before, I'm not, um, I admire what you do and I appreciate what you do in the city. And, but there's no way I could do it. I'm grateful that you're doing that job.
I'm grateful to be doing it.
Yeah.
It's
So,
it is from a biblical standpoint.
uh
There's no it's like a few other jobs. There's so many opportunities for service and to influence your community in so many ways that it's very rewarding in that way. I've never would have seen it that way. It's got its challenges, but it is very
yeah,
rewarding.
yeah. And so talk a little bit more about, the service aspect of this and how it applies to our work. You and I met long before the whole follower of one idea came about,
Hmm.
even though it's something I'd wrestled with for a long time. But, things started clicking for me a few years ago. And then we started talking about it because I see every job we have as an opportunity to serve other people so that Jesus might become visible. And therefore, the service part of every one of our jobs becomes this ministry that we can do.
Right,
Talk a little bit about how that fits in your situation and what your experience and thoughts are.
right. Well, when they asked Jesus, "What's the greatest commandment?" He said, love Lord your God with your heart, soul, and mind. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. And it kind of, if you want to take a simplified view of the world, we're here to love God. And as we love him more, it's going to build in us this love for others and the need and the want to serve others. And whether you call that servant leadership or biblical leadership or servanthood or whatever you call that, you can actually do that whether you're in a service business or not. Even if you're producing widgets, you're still serving your peers, your boss. I had a wise man once say, make your boss successful, and there'll always be a place for you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's true. So we're serving our boss. We're serving those people that might be our direct reports because it's our job to bring them along and help them reach their fullest potential and fulfillment, find purpose and meaning in their job. Um, but in city government, it's very dynamic, very challenging because you have so many different arms of service that are just different from one another. So there's every opportunity to serve and to influence the people. We do have 300 full-time workers, and the goal is to create a culture. We talk about real people, real character, real community, and that real community, quite honestly, because I've got my First Amendment rights. I mean, it's biblical community. It's shalom. It's where things work together and people serve one another, and and there's fulfillment, there's purpose and meaning in that. And it's trying to bring those people along that work for the city to get the fulfillment out of that purpose and meaning and the joy of serving others while being fulfilled themselves, while being the best person they can be, the person that God created them to be.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great perspective. I like the idea too of we're serving each other as we try and achieve a goal that's bigger than any of us individually.
Right. Yeah,
And
we all have a deep entrenched desire to find purpose and meaning.
mhm,
That's just that universal question, and God has put within us that fulfillment and joy that we find in serving others. I mean, every great person if you look for it hard enough, in fact, I just read a George Washington quote. There's this email called 1440 and the George Washington. I wish I could find it, but basically, happiness is found in serving others. Happiness is found in the moral responsibility to serve others. And it doesn't matter whether it's Gandhi or Abraham Lincoln or Mother Teresa or Martin Luther King Jr. They've all said something to that effect.
yeah,
And it's it's hard to get through our selfish flesh and heads that's really the road to happiness, just like Jesus said, love God, love others.
yeah. No, that's exactly right. So now you've also been involved with Follower of One. Tell people about your perspective on the Follower of One ministry or the Marketplace mission trips?
Sure, sure. Follower of One, I love it. It's a calling that I felt like I got 35 years ago when I left seminary and committed myself to have a workplace that honored
Mhm.
honored Christ. So I've been trying to do that for 35 years, but until Follower of One came along, I could say, oh, we've done well. I've been obedient. We've been obedient as a workplace. I can point to lots of, maybe obedience. You can't call them success stories. Success is up to God, but I can at least point to obedience. And what I really have loved about Follower of One is you and others that have worked with you have created something that's so doable. It's packaged so well. I just told a coworker that, if you'd asked me 5 years ago, so I like the culture you have around here, how do you create that? I would have said, I don't know. You just need to, have your quiet time every day, be obedient, love God, love others, and hope it grows. But with Follower of One, it's packaged in such a way you can share it with anyone. It answers a lot of the big questions that we have as believers. In fact, one of the ways that I describe it to people is the big question of time. We all have 7 times 24, and that equals 168. We have 168 hours a week, and the way I look at it, you've got 68 hours a week for sleeping, eating, and personal hygiene. You figure it out. But whether you sleep a little or a lot, sleeping, eating, personal hygiene, that takes about 60 hours. That leaves you 100 hours a week. Well, 50 hours a week, we all try to protect for discretionary time. But it's everything. I mean, it's time with family, investing, helping kids with the homework. It's rest and relaxation. It's going to church. It's worship. It's quiet time in the morning. It's fixing the car, changing the oil, painting the third room, doing whatever projects. It's watching TV or going to a movie, entertainment, whatever it is, everything else. And then you got 50 hours at work. So how on earth, with the faith and work view or my calling to ministry, where do I get the time to go on a mission trip? Where do I get the time to be a part of the car care ministry or lead a Bible study or whatever? Because I got my 68, I got my 50 at work, and then everything else is jammed into that other 50. So what I love about Follower of One is it's not asking for your discretionary time or money or extra. It's a matter of understanding that if God has put me, Paul says in 1 Corinthians 7:17, whatever you're doing, that's what God has signed you to do. Keep doing that. Stay in the position that you're in. And I mentioned those Proverbs. Whatever path you're on, at the very least, your work, your career, where you spend a good 40 to 50 hours at least coming, going, checking your email, whatever, around 50 hours. At the very least, that's part of your calling. It could well be the calling on your life. It could well be God's. That's your place of influence. Now you have a responsibility and a calling to your family, your kids, your spouse, your parents, your grandkids, whatever that may be. But your work could well be the calling in your life. So once we recognize that and realize that, oh, how am I doing on that calling? What's my work ID? How do people see me at work? Do they even know that I'm a believer? Do they say, oh, that's that guy, he goes to church I think, but he'll tell a dirty joke and he's got the best ones, how do they see you? Well, hopefully they don't see you like that, but how am I doing? And the 5 points of Follower of One, pray for others, appreciate others, know what you believe, serve others, and speak for yourself. All those things resonate. Mm-hmm. Every follower of Christ knows I should probably be praying. Boy, it'd be really good to pray for my peers at work and the people that I serve and the people that I oversee. And how about praying for that meeting I really don't want to have today? That's a good thing to pray for. I'm that tense, difficult, anxious meeting or that thing that's due, that project's due. And then appreciate others. Gosh, I mean, the world opens up when you just show gratefulness and appreciation for the people around you that help you be successful, that help your organization be successful. And knowing what you believe, every believer understands they need to have some knowledge of the gospel and what we have to offer others in following Christ and serving others. I mean, that might be bringing donuts, that might be helping them out with a project, that might be just offering to help out or listen to someone that's having a difficult time, and then speak for yourself. As you say all the time, eventually somebody may ask you, why are you doing this? This is not what I'm used to. So altogether, I think that follower of one, it kind of checks off a lot of boxes.
Yeah.
A lot of us who didn't see our work as a calling felt guilty because we couldn't go on a mission trip. We couldn't carve out that time and spend vacation and be away from family and raise money and get a passport and get shots or whatever. We couldn't be involved in the landscaping ministry at church or the whatever it is. And so we feel guilty, and it checks off that box. If my ministry, my calling is at work, I don't have to feel so guilty. It answers what are you doing about the Great Commission?
Yeah.
Well, I'm in my calling. What about the greatest commandments? So it really checks a lot of boxes and can create some energy in loving others every day.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm kind of rambling now, but
Well, I agree with you. I appreciate you saying it that. I love it when someone else says it a different way than I say it, because I don't want to be the only one saying these things. To me, it was exciting because I wanted a ministry I didn't have to leave work to do. And, here God's given us this idea, and you can be involved with Follower of One and not quit anything else that you're doing. I mean, in fact, I think that's what God was always trying to get us to do, was to be this minister all the time. And, I've always felt like my job was, as a Christian in the workplace, my job was to stay out of trouble until next Sunday. Was to cause as little difficulty as possible. Make sure I make a donation. And, oh, by the way, when I have availability, show up at a meeting or work in a car care clinic or, bring canned goods to whatever. And so that's the big difference for me.
Yeah. Well, when I look, this just thought occurred to me. When I look at the people that have been throughout my life that are finding joy, if I just look at my two daughters as an example, they both currently have found a role, a job within their giftedness, but it doesn't, and there's joy in that because they're doing what God has called them to do while building relationships with the people around them, whether that's helping them specifically and directly, or whether that's setting a good example in the work that they do. But God has called us each into an area of our giftedness. It's not always easy to see, but the fulfillment that people find in work is when they find biblical fulfillment serving others or working in their giftedness. Ephesians 2:10, doing those works that God has set aside for you to do. It's that circuitous path that, if we commit our work to the Lord, our plans are established. The joy is in finding work that is fulfilling, and it's fulfilling because we're serving others. We're making a difference. Everybody wants to make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And usually the reason for joy is biblical. At the base, it's biblical. Kind of like all character is God's character. It's biblically based. Yes. We have a character program here at the city of Owasso, and it's biblically based because all good character traits are found in Scripture, and they're found in other religion scriptures too, because God has put within each one of us this conscience of understanding what's right and wrong, what's good character and bad character.
That's right. Yeah, I think it's interesting how God does that. But then there's another thing that happens that I noticed, because when I was younger, it was easier for me to find purpose and mission in the joy that I experienced doing a job. But it was only when I started getting older that I started wondering about how much of that job was going to live beyond me, or was it only going to be for a certain period of time? I remember wrestling with the book Halftime when it came out, and I appreciated the fact that the author, Bob Buford, had done all this thought and plowed this ground to help people like myself figure out that there's significance effort that we can pursue as well, about making part of our life significant. But I couldn't just change my life around. I had to figure out a way to do that without leaving my job because I had a mortgage and I had a family. I didn't have a business that I could sell. Bob was fortunate enough to have a business that he could sell out of so that he could do some of that. I didn't have a business I could sell. And so I struggled with that for a number of years, was how can I be a minister? Or what I want to be a full-time minister. Why did God call me to be a part-time one?
Right.
And so anyway,
Well, what you've come up with though is, again, so doable. It brings focus and intentionality what we're doing, and it's so simple. Again, any believer would understand that it's my responsibility to pray for others, serve others, know what I believe, speak for myself, appreciate others. And sometimes I think just that second, in scripture, I don't know, I've read a lot lately about how gratitude, I've talked about some about gratefulness, but how gratitude builds humility, which is to me the essential strength you need to lead anyone, is a certain amount of humility, understanding that
yes,
whatever you've got is God given. And but those steps, those 5 steps, are so doable. It brings focus and intentionality to your workplace. And if I focus and do these things, I read a quote here recently: focus people get things done, but people who can prioritize get the right things done. And
hmm,
what those 5 steps do is prioritize what's really important. Now, it's still important to go do a great job, and Colossians 3:23, whatever your hands find to do it with all your might. You're not going to be a very good representative of Christ or your faith if you're not doing a good job.
yeah,
But there's plenty of margin where you can help the organization succeed by helping others, by serving others, by appreciating them. Appreciation is kind of like the oil that brings, makes the parts move. Because what does everybody want? If you read Gallup, why people are happy or unhappy at a job, it's their relationship with their supervisor. And what do they really want from their supervisor? In every case, they want to be valued. They want to be appreciated for what they bring to the table. They want to be recognized for their giftedness, their contribution, what they bring. And when you put those things all together, you say, well, this is really good for an organization. If we have 10 people even in our organization that are a follower of one, people that are praying, appreciating, serving, working hard, then that's going to be great for your organization.
yeah.
I
That's
don't
a
know. There's a little bit of a magic to the simplicity there.
Well, I appreciate it, and I appreciate your explanation for everyone. Warren's on our board as well. Warren's the chairman of our board. We're still growing up as a nonprofit organization. It's still early times in the history of Follower of One. So I'm grateful that you're listening to this podcast, and I'm grateful for Warren for being a part of it. What other what other kinds of things, what other kinds of ideas strike you as ideas for believers today about how they can, is there something else that you could suggest to someone that they could take action on now to do something with their faith in the workplace? What's something they can do today, especially in the pandemic?
Well, you're kind of relegated to a lot of Zoom and emails and whatnot. One of the things that, we all have different personalities, and some people are more expressive and outgoing than others. And if you're more on the introverted side and you keep to yourself, I think you have to become a little bit more declarative. And if you feel like you appreciate someone, just tell them that. Tell them, hey, I really appreciate you. I'm grateful for you. And I think that goes a long way toward at least making that connection that you're for them.
Yeah.
I'm for you. I see the value that you bring. I mean, that's a great start. And if you're a believer, of course, praying for your peers. I mean, it's those same action items. As far as the specifics, I mean, it's listening, it's paying attention, it's trying to figure out what, that person. Some people don't even want to talk to you. That's, they're busy. They don't want to talk to you. They don't want public appreciation. They don't, so it's taking enough time to care. I had a question for, we have these good to great groups. You've heard of that
Mhm.
before in the book. And we had good to great 1 for the directors, and good to great 2, and good to great 3. And when I was assistant city manager, I led a great three group of upcoming supervisors. And I asked the question, to be a good leader, do you have to care about the people that you lead? And you'd be surprised, a lot of people, that's kind of a stumper. I don't know. I don't really like some of the people, you might say. Um, but um, you know, Reggie Joiner, the great quote Reggie Joiner said, people need to know that you like them before they're ever going to believe that you love them.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're called of God to love others, and our love for other people collectively is growing, not to the degree that, maybe for your wife, your husband, your kids, but God will grow in your heart a love for all other people. And you've got to figure out a way to express that. So sometimes, whether that's through appreciation or whether that's through just listening a little bit and caring and stopping for a moment, um, it sounds trite, but saying thank you and stopping to listen when somebody wants to talk, I mean, is a huge start.
Yeah, I actually heard a great idea today, and that is just having Zoom office hours. So if you have your own Zoom account, just saying, I'll be on my Zoom bridge during these hours tomorrow. If you want to just talk, stop by
Mhm.
my office.
Right. Well,
And,
we're on a skeleton crew here at Owasso City Hall. I think we got about 20% of the people in the building, so we don't see
yeah,
that many people for sure. But the great thing about this time is it's causing a lot of people to think very seriously about what's important in life, and
mhm,
I feel like God is using it for exactly that reason. So it's a time that you can sometimes you can say things, city of Owasso, we're comfortable to say, hey, I'll be praying for you,
mhm,
or here's a scripture, or here's a, something. But if that's not comfortable in your place, we are now in a time where people are okay hearing, that I'm praying for you.
yeah,
So when people start to think, when God brings eternity into focus and people start checking what's really important, it opens up avenues for those spiritual conversations. And
yeah.
so I don't know, figuring out what that is, to whether it's just appreciating them or listening to them, or um, asking them why they think that way, or what this is doing to,
Mhm.
their personal life or their worldview or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. No, I'm sending more emails too, and just telling people, hey, I was thinking about you. Um, how are things going? How's your family? I've learned friends who have been exposed to COVID-19. I've um, friends who were under the weather with it, but have defeated it. I haven't had lost any friends that I'm aware of with it, but other people have different things going on at this time, and everything's more difficult. Going into a hospital is more difficult. Having a death in the family is more difficult. Everything's harder right now. So I find it really easy to just take a few minutes and say, thank you very much, or take a few minutes and say, hey, how's everything going? Just what's going on? No agenda, just
Right.
how are you doing?
Well,
So,
you had a great idea the other day. I can't remember where I thought you said it or I read it, but just sending a short email said, "Hey, I prayed for you today. Is there anything specific that that I could, seek God for in your life?" And some people are really, they've got things that they're worried about. They're very open to that.
yeah. One of the other things I'm trying to do, I need to do a better job of. There are a group of people where I spend part of my work time, a group of people in that company that I never really work directly with. They report to someone else. I see them though in social situations, in an all hands meeting, or when I walk past their office. And I don't have any interaction with them. And so I'm trying to reach out to a few of those people and just say, hey, how's it going? How have you been? I'm not even sure many of those people are believers, but I think everybody could use someone checking on them right now, and that's something that we can do. So
Right.
it's definitely a strange time, that's for sure. And I agree with you. I think God's using it to get our attention about a lot of things.
Right. There
So,
are two, this just came to mind, but one of the things about follower of one, I really believe that the need for the emphasis on follower of one is because in the last 100 years, we've allowed, two specific lies of the enemy to just infiltrate the workplace. And it's really one lie. You don't talk about religion and politics. I'm amazed when I start to talk about this, how many people will say, well, you can't do that. You can't. And I'm not talking about, sharing tracts with someone or opening up scripture saying, have you, read this or whatever, just talking at all. They say, well, you can't do that. I can't do that. Talk about religion and politics. And those two lies have created one, it's kind of stifled what I think is the key called upon God calling that most of us have to be a witness at work, to share Christ at work, at least in our actions and
yes.
attitudes. It stifled that because a lot of people think it's illegal,
Yeah.
and like I said, separation of church and state, people think that, especially in government, it's illegal. Well,
Yeah.
all separation church state means is there's no state church. We don't have an official church of our state. You don't have to be a Catholic or a Lutheran or whatever to be in our country. It's freedom of worship. But back to the two lies,
Yeah.
um, people really believe, not talk about religion and politics. And today, now you see the fruition of that lie. Talking about politics, we don't have civil discourse about politics. Why can a Democrat and a Republican, a liberal and a conservative not talk about something and say, we agree, but I understand your position. I respected it. That's an interesting point you made. We're so polarized that we've lost the art of civil discourse. So it's put our country in a really rough situation. If you can't talk about religion, share your faith, give the rationale for why you make the decisions you do, which you can't separate a Christian from his faith, his or her faith, because that's how they make the decisions they make. There's a biblical basis for almost every decision. So you can't separate those two. And then when it comes to politics, we're so at odds with each other that, you see it on social media, whatever you want to call it, whether you want to call it trolling or just the viciousness of people who have different polarized viewpoints.
Yeah. No,
Anyway,
and I agree. I think this time will help us appreciate the people more than taking issue with the differences.
I hope so. That's exactly the point I was trying to make. Hopefully we come back and we recognize that, we're real people with real struggles and real questions. You want to listen to that. You want to offer to pray, whatever the case may be.
Yeah. Yeah. The other one I kind of come across all the time, everybody does hear the word sharing your faith as talking. And, I think we have to live a faith that is given away much more than it is asking someone to do something. And when we do that, then people will be more interested in talking about it.
Right. Yeah. The people don't want to hear what you have to say if they can't see, that you care about them and that you're for them.
Well, I am grateful for you being a part of this. Thank you very much. And thanks for sharing your thoughts on all these things. I appreciate your friendship too.
You bet. Same to you. I can either praise you or blame you for being city manager here. So usually I look at it in a good way.
You can't blame me for that. You can get a lot of mileage out of that, but I don't think you can blame me for it.
Yeah. No, it was
So,
good advice.
well, thank you very much. I also typically tell people how you can get in touch with Warren or with whoever my podcast guest is. Or do you have like a LinkedIn profile, or do you want to
I
direct
do. I'm
people
on
into?
LinkedIn. I'm not sure. I assume if you just searched Warren Lehr, last name Lehr, I
Yeah.
would pop up. So you
I'll put a
certainly,
link to that in the show notes too.
okay, you can do
So
that.
I'll get that. I'm pretty sure we're connected, so I'll make sure that happens.
You
Thank
bet.
you very much, sir. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate the opportunity.
And thank you, everyone, for listening to us. Hopefully, this will energize you to continue to expand your workplace ministry as well. If you have any questions about that, check us out at followerofone.org and join us on the next Marketplace mission trip. Warren and I, we didn't even talk about that, so we'll have to talk about that maybe in another podcast. Thanks very much. Bye.